I'm just okay. Thank you, Ellen. Um, Again, welcome tonight to our main speaker, Ben Freeman, who has co-written a book about military spending on our endless wars, which is certainly in sync with some of the major projects the Veterans for Peace has been working on this year, talking about you in Ukraine and Sudan and all over the world. Um, Ben, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Um, I'm going to turn the program over to you, and I understand you're going to be doing a show and tell, so that we will have. We thought about that, and visual aids I think are really important to the material you're going to be speaking with us tonight. So thank you so much for the show and for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Susan. Show and tell sounds so much better than presentation, so I'm gonna steal that verbiage going forward. Thank you for staying in touch. You know, we had a great radio discussion. I think now almost 2 months ago too. And so it's a pleasure to reconnect and thank you all for attending tonight and having me here. You're doing just wonderful work. So I'm really honored to be here. And I'm honored to talk about this book too. I think, as Susan said, there's so much synergy that I think exists between the work that y'all are doing, that the Quincy Institute is doing, and that certainly is provided in this book. So I will do a very a brief show and tell here. Is that coming through okay? Awesome. Okay. Well, we'll start here with this book. We originally set out, we began this project more than 2 years ago, and I will say, $1 trillion military is all in the news now. But when we had this title 2 years ago, we thought we were gonna, it was a $1 trillion war machine was going to be, prophetic about something that could be coming. But it quickly went from being prophetic to this summer when the big beautiful bill passed, to just being descriptive. And now 2 weeks ago, Trump's calling for a $1.5 trillion military budget. So now our book is dated apparently, and we already need a second edition. But this project has been long in the works, with my wonderful co-author, Bill Hartung, who has been doing this work now for almost half a century. And where this project started was, I think, where a lot of discussions about the military industrial complex start. And that's with Eisenhower's warning and then in the Cross of Iron speech. And he really spoke during, he coined the term military industrial complex. And he spoke to some of these trade-offs that we're seeing, and the theft that some of this military spending is from those who hunger and those who are not free. And really spoke to some of the themes in the opening, the beautiful opening video too. So we began with Eisenhower's warning, and what we started to take a hard look at what was happening today, and what we saw was some of these factors that Eisenhower had identified. They were all very much there, but they weren't just there. It was a military industrial complex on steroids. The lobbyists that he had talked about, they now outnumber members of Congress almost 2 to 1. Contractors are spending, in the neighbor every year more than $100 million. Last year they spent $150 million on lobbyists. They're giving that money to members of Congress. Those members of Congress are then turning around and becoming lobbyists for Pentagon contractors themselves, or going to work at hawkish think tanks that support those same Pentagon contractors. So this sort of iron triangle, the military industrial congressional complex that Eisenhower identified, it doesn't just still exist. It is absolutely thriving, and there's more money in it than there's ever been before. But what really compelled that part of this has been documented, I think, very well, and both Bill and I thought very well. The other part that we started seeing and we started writing about in our work was oh yeah, sorry, we've written a lot about this part of it too. I'm getting ahead of myself. What jumped out to us in this part was that everything Eisenhower had identified, it's only gotten worse. And Bill Hartung had produced some excellent research with the Cost of War project at Brown. And they found that contractors are now getting more than half of the entire Pentagon budget. Special programs like the ICBM lobby are just completely dominated by special interests, by the private corporations who are building these intercontinental ballistic missiles. And then too, to that revolving door theme, we're just seeing a very straight line from the top rungs of the Pentagon directly into the defense industry, with more than 4 out of 5 four-star generals going into the defense industry directly. But in addition to that, we were seeing this other part of the military industrial complex that I think would make Eisenhower roll over in his grave. We're seeing the MIC's influence at think tanks, and this is where I've done a considerable amount of work trying to track how Pentagon contractors are, which think tanks they're giving money to, and then what those think tanks are doing in return for that work. Another a big area is in the entertainment industry, and I think this is one of the sneakier ways that the military industrial complex is exerting influence now. Some intrepid scholars identified more than 2,500 movies and TV shows have, in some way or another, been censored or been, outright co-opted in some cases by the Pentagon, by the Entertainment Liaison Office there. And a lot of that's happening without us even having any idea about it. It's most of the blockbuster movies you're seeing these days. Almost every movie in the Marvel franchise, for example, has had the Pentagon involvement in it. So, some of the films, as we discuss in the book, they come up as, just outright Pentagon propaganda, and nobody knows about it. Another big issue we're seeing is in sports. We've been seeing this for a while. With flyovers at sporting events. Those are costly and certainly promote militarism in their own right. But here is an example that we're seeing where Anduril, one of the new defense tech firms, they are now a full-fledged sponsor of the Ohio State football team. And so we're seeing not just military involvement at sporting events, we're seeing more and more direct Pentagon contractor involvement and, just unabashed advertising for militarism at sporting events. Another issue we document in the book. The gaming industry is another big recruiting ground for the military. A lot of drone operators are coming from this area. Each of the services now has their own gaming team, and one of their goals is explicitly to recruit folks at gaming events. The museums are another area. We could go on and on. The DC Metro, even for those of you that have traveled to DC recently, you've probably seen this. I was just in DC 2 weeks ago, and from the moment you hit the ground at the DC airport, you're just inundated with defense contractor ads. They're on the Metro. And they're on the buses, really everywhere you go. The military industrial complex, it's following. We're fully immersed in it. So we had been doing some of this work at Quincy, but we hadn't really put it all together. So that was a big impetus for us to get all of this down in one book, to provide folks with a tool to understand just how crazy and convoluted this whole system is. And then hopefully our goal through all of this is, very similar to you guys, is to hopefully find a path to peace here. And when we're thinking about what that looks like for us, we're sort of really quickly, I'll go over this. This is baked into the Quincy Institute's mission, which is, in that square there at the top. And the part that we really wanted to hone in on was that section there in blue. We very much want to not just provide transparency about what the military industrial complex is, what they're up to, But we want to push back on it. We want to break this system. We want to give U.S. foreign policy back to the American people, not the powerful. So our goal here is explicitly to fulfill the Quincy Institute's mission on that, and find this path to peace. And so, in terms of specific reforms that we're pursuing, we recommend in the book, and we're pursuing, privately now as we go forward with the book. We're looking to limit campaign contributions from the weapons firms. Citizens United is an issue for us. We want to tighten restrictions on the revolving door to stop that, just seemingly perfect flow from the top rungs of the Pentagon to defense contractors. We want to ban Congress from investing in arms companies, and we want to bring back some of the good military reform caucuses that we've seen over the years. Societally, we've got a lot of work to do too. A big one here is just educating folks on Hollywood's just extremely strong connection to the military-industrial complex. I think that there's this sort of myth out there of a very liberal Hollywood enterprise. That may be true in some areas, but it's certainly not true when it comes to militarism. When you see so many films being influenced by the Pentagon. So one of the big reforms that we're pushing there is mandatory disclosure of Pentagon involvement, not buried in the credits, on minute 5 as the credits are strolling by. We want a disclosure statement right up front at the very beginning of these movies. So at the very least, viewers know what they're seeing is on some level Pentagon propaganda. Finally, media. We've got a lot of work to do here, and we want transparent declarations of their sources, of their conflicts of interest. And we've taken a big step in this vein. At the Quincy Institute, we've produced what's called thinktankfundingtracker.org, where you can hop on the website right now and look up any of the top foreign policy think tanks. You can see exactly which Pentagon contractors are funding them, which U.S. government agencies are funding them. A lot of these big think tanks, they get money directly from DoD or the individual services there. So with that website, we're providing some of that transparency there. And a big reason we created that website was to hand it over to our friends in the media, because all too often we were writing about these conflicts of interest and who they were citing, only citing hawkish think tanks and foreign policy pieces. And the journalists would come back and say like, oh yeah, well, we just don't have time to track down the money behind all of our sources. So, we just can't do that. So we created the think tank funding tracker to make their job really, really easy. So now they have no excuse. If you're citing somebody from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, you have no excuse not to know that that is a defense contractor funded think tank through and through. Finally, and this is really where you guys come in, frankly, we are doing a nationwide book tour. We are talking to groups just like yours. We're doing podcasts. We're going on the radio. We're even going to some military installations. I'm in 2 weeks. I'm headed to Northern Virginia, going to Norfolk, and we're actually going to be talking to folks on a battleship there. And doing a bunch of other events in areas like that. We're going out to LA, book festivals, all over. We're really trying to get the message out there about this, and we're really trying to drum up public support to push back on the war machine. We sort of feel like DC is kind of sold out to the war machine. As I mentioned, everywhere you go on the metro, contractors just own the city in many ways. So we want to take the fight out into the heartland. We want to bring the fight, to the people out there, and hopefully drum up some support across the nation to push back on that military-industrial complex domination of DC. I will stop there. I've already talked longer than I was hoping to, so I will I will stop there and happily look forward to any and all questions from y'all.
Does somebody want to start with questions?
Alice has a hand up.
Okay, Alice, go ahead.
Unmute, Alice.
I can't hear you, Alice. Still can't hear you, Alice.
Shoot.
Not yet.
Pushing unmute, nothing. Okay, can you hear me now?
Now you are. Yes.
Thanks.
You're fine now.
Sorry. I just want to thank you, Ben, and I want to tell you that I just called your partner, Bill Hartung, who I know very well,
Oh,
because I
awesome.
think something's missing in his work, so it's missing in your work, which is that there are offers on the table from Russia and China. For instance, they gave their 80th anniversary speech calling for negotiations on a treaty to keep weapons out of space and not to be the first to put weapons in space. No first use. Nobody knows about this. It's like blacked out and nobody's talking about it. And we're talking about a golden dome for over $1 trillion, and they're willing to forego all of that. And like Bill said to me, well, how can you trust them? Well, we don't have to trust them. At least let's let everybody know that it's there and ask that we speak with them. If they're full of crap, we'll find out. But they're saying it over and over. I mean, they keep putting this draft treaty into the UN, et cetera. So I think what we're talking about, what you're exposing is very important, but we also need a little section of opportunities to negotiate with other countries. Let China and Russia do something about our military industrial complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
Yeah.
Anthony, are you next?
Sure. Did you want to say something to that,
I'm
Benjamin?
so sorry, Ellen. I can't
Oh,
see
go
who's.
ahead.
Yeah, I can't. Right. Okay, Anthony. No, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. Important contribution, Alice. Thank you, Benjamin, very much. It's very clear, very concise. My gosh, we haven't had a show and tell for in 5 minutes like that in a long time. So I have two questions, three, but I'll just give two right now. One is this book you were working on before Francesca Albanese put out her report on Palestine, the 48 major corporations that are benefiting from genocide and apartheid. And in studying those corporations, it seems that they are the same corporations that completely involved in our military industrial complex. So the question is, do you link at all our wars, especially what we're doing, providing all this assistance to Israel, that genocide, to works like that? Perhaps not in this book. And the other is, I head on Monday down to the Nuclear Deterrence Summit. It seems that anyone I speak to, except for this crowd, don't know about this summit, but it's where all our corporations that make nuclear weapons, hundreds of contractors in our major corps, gather for 3 days in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually me and 4 other people standing out in the freezing cold with our banner saying, stop. But their motto is accelerate urgently. So you're right. You said it. They are thriving. This industry is thriving. And you get that sense at this summit that they are partying. The money is flowing, and we are just building nuclear weapons now like crazy. So anyway, your thoughts on those two things, or if you want to collect more questions, go for it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, those are great. Thank you for protesting. I know how thankless that can be to be one of the few people out front protesting. I actually read absolute side note, but I swear it's worth it. My sort of origin. And my family, my mom literally sells seashells by the seashore. She still does, 25 years later, she's still rocking the seashells. And I thought it would be awesome to go into that field. And but then the Iraq War happened, and it was while I was in school, and I was just like, this is idiotic. I didn't buy any of it, and that was not a popular opinion in Florida. But I got very active, and I started doing protest, and I went to college in Daytona Beach, and there was President Bush was coming to the Daytona 500 to kind of be the honorary guy there, and we were able to organize a decent sized protest, 50 of us or so, and we stood right out in front of the Daytona 500 and did an anti-war protest. Had beer bottles bottles thrown at us, spit on, all sorts of, bad thing, that you can imagine. And a lot of you probably experienced. No, this is what I want to do. That somehow I was just like, this is what I want to do for a living, and I'm going to figure out this whole dang war thing. And I'm going to dedicate my career to this. 20 years later, here we are, writing the $1 trillion war machine. Um, Sorry for an extensive backstory, but that was, your protest inspired me there. But directly to your questions, with the link to Gaza, absolutely, that's a big part of our work. That's part of this book is calling out the war profiteering that's happened in Gaza. Francesca Albanese is spot on. That is war profiteering off of a genocide, off of the backs of countless civilians that are dead, and they're unabashed about the war profiteering side of it. No questions asked, and it's not, it's sadly, it's not just Gaza. A big push for the 10 to 20 years, arguably, back to the start of the Iraq War, are foreign arms sales. And, so in addition to pushing up the Pentagon budget, they're just pushing arms sales abroad as much as they can. We know, and Bill Hartung did a great piece a few years back where he looked at all the conflicts in the world and just asked a simple question: how many U.S. Arms are involved in those conflicts? And shocking no one, I think the figure was more than 2/3 of the conflicts involved U.S. weapons. So, 2 out of every 3 wars in the world we're fueling. So it's not just the war machine isn't just about the wars that we're a part of. We're fueling militarism all over the world. And for the nuclear deterrence summit, that's another, like to Alice's previous comment about space. Space right now, there's a con that these for these contractors. And, it's the same thing with nuclear deterrence, same thing with Golden Dome. And with Golden Dome, especially, you're just seeing just an absurd amount of money being dumped into this completely not thought out system, and yet the money's flowing before the thinking has really even started on it. I see space the same way, and so unfortunately, as you experienced, there's so much money flowing to it already. We just got to find a way to somehow peel that back. So I very much agree with both you and Alice on those two domains.
Thank you. Todd Pierce, are you next?
Yeah, Mr. Freeman, enjoyed your talk, show and tell, whatever. But I got to ask you, how do you reconcile what you're saying here with what the Quincy Institute does in promoting national conservatism, the Heritage Foundation? I mean, the worst of the worst, allied with the American Conservative magazine, whose fingerprints are all over Project 2025. Evidently, they kept Quincy's off for the purpose of just magazine is all over it. I put a couple links in the thing, including just today, I got one from Responsible Statecraft celebrating Dan's, who was his brother was the architect of the Project 2025, which was basically Hitler's Mein Kampf, updated for the 21st century and for the United States purposes. I mean, I could go on about that. I used to be friends with Kelly Vlahos, very good friends with her. So I've been following and involved even. I attended your inaugural Quincy Institute event when Walt and Mearsheimer called for not peace, they called for offshore balancing, meaning we're going to keep our gunboats off your coast and be ready to fire upon you, like we did with Venezuela just recently. So, I mean, it's so stark that Quincy Institute supports the national conservatism of the Israeli settler Yoram Hazony so much. I mean, this past, was in 2024, you had an event, a foreign policy for the middle class, where Vance went on and said, yeah, we're realists and we believe in basically killing our enemies as hard and fast as possible. And a couple weeks later, the National Conservative Conference is held, going on with the same cast of members, including Vance, who's always been part of this. I could go on and on. Take a look. I've been trying to tell peace activists, you got to open your goddamn eyes. because there's something going on here to deceive you. And I saw so many people believe that MAGA was for peace. And God damn it, we're a year into it now, and where's the fucking peace? So Quincy Institute, unfortunately, has contributed a whole lot to that cognitive operation of presenting MAGA as the peacemakers, when it's been promoting the Israeli settler ideology and American conservatism of going back to Buckley Kendall and others, of the utmost imperialistic foreign policy we could possibly have, to where it's now totally global, totally far advanced, taking Greenland. I mean, that's a done deal. Consider that a done deal. And your own magazine is celebrating it. Or, Quincy Institute, Responsible Statecraft, just today. So how can you reconcile that with, and so one final think tank is the Quincy Institute. Why don't you do it yourself, you and Hartung? I respect both of what you've written, but at the same time, you're promoting the worst politicians in this world, including in this event, Foreign Policy for the Middle Class, with Ramaswamy calling for basically cutting the heads off of Hamas, Palestinians, etc. I could go on, but it's so bizarre. I've sort of just have given up.
Todd, believe it or not, I feel your fury, and I feel I don't want to speak for the entire Quincy Institute, but I can think. I guess I kind of will. The what happened with Trump 2.0 and MAGA when it came to foreign policy, we very much felt deceived too. And this was one of the reasons why we if you pick up a copy of the $1 trillion war machine, we open with President Trump on the campaign trail. And we open good anti-military industrial complex game on the campaign trail. We included a quote from a speech that he gave at one rally, but he did it throughout the campaign. There was a very no forever wars, no war profiteering slogans throughout the campaign. But then, as we explain in the book, he did what so many presidents before him have done. And he said one thing on the campaign trail to get elected and did a completely different thing in office. And so we very much, we feel your fury. We feel deceived by what happened too. And I would say about the JD Vance event, I wasn't a part of that. I'll tell you that much. But I was recently asked by a reporter to explain that. He had very much your same question. He was like, so you guys had JD Vance at this event, and he kind of preached this foreign policy of restraint at the event. But then it was right after the Venezuela, kidnapping, the international crime, taking a foreign leader. And, the reporter asked, how do you reconcile having JD Vance at that event with JD Vance supporting kidnapping? And I'll say to you what I said to him. We can't reconcile that. I don't think JD Vance can reconcile those two beliefs in his head. I think what JD Vance is doing now is political opportunism, and it's not his real foreign policy belief. He's trying to appease the commander in chief, his boss, Donald Trump. That's not a real foreign policy belief for him. I will say, Todd, one thing that is important to know about the Quincy Institute is that we disagree with each other on so many things. I am very much a left-leaning member of the Quincy Institute, but we have very much right-leaning folks at the Quincy Institute too, and we disagree on a lot of things. Particularly on domestic policy. But the one thing everybody at the Quincy Institute believes in is a more peaceful foreign policy. We're all on the exact same page when it comes to foreign policy. There's nobody there pushing for forever wars. There's nobody there pushing for more Republican or they vote Democrat. We're all in lockstep on foreign policy, and that's where we're at on that. I can't speak to if some of the folks are spouting some crazy stuff on domestic policy. I certainly wouldn't condone that. But as an organization, we're foreign policy focused. We do not focus on the domestic policy stuff.
Thank you. Rachel.
Hi. Hi, Ben. Thank you so much for clarifying focusing on the defense budget spending of this country. I would like to request that you also focus on how not only the money, also personnel, people are moving around, especially the relationship between Pentagon and the State Department. For me, they are like twin brothers. Like for example, early 2020, at the beginning of Biden administration, Anthony Blinken went to China and yelling at the government officials of China. That was the starting point of the big fighting mode throughout the Biden administration, then carried over by Trump 2.0. So as long as the foreign policy goes, doesn't matter Republican or Democrats, they all carry out the same military policy. And for that, a State Department is not helping. Rather, they are pumping more conflicts to major parts of the world. And not only the department itself, but those personnels. For example, Anthony Blinken is a co-founder of West Exec, right? Yeah. So when he became head of the State Department, he brought 5 or 6 of his personnel from his own consulting firm. For example, like Jen Psaki is one of them, and also head of the whatchamacallit, the current position where what's her name? Sorry, the head of the intelligent departments, right? She was also from Exec West. So those consulting firm is very, very dark and making money. They are providing a policy that pump on defense industry, and the defense industry is major clients of them. And this kind of area, I want more how do you say? I would like to see more spotlight on those area as well. So the money as well as personnel movement. And also I heard that 50 to 60,000 people, former intelligent officers, now working at SNS companies and a major newspaper and magazine companies, making very, very decisive opinion in those major companies. For example, who deletes whose accounts and things like that. So I think that this kind of area needs more spotlights to make sure that the media information that we've been observing is quite being manipulated by the defense industry. Thank you.
I could not agree more. I mean, West Exec. I'll speak to them briefly. This is a company founded by Blinken and Michelle Flournoy, who was just if you remember back even a few years, but before Blinken's transfer, she was a step away from becoming Secretary of Defense, and had espoused very hawkish views. Formerly the head of the Center for a New American Security, to a very, very hawkish think tank that takes a lot of money from Pentagon contractors as well, and foreign governments as well. We had a scoop on her signing a court paper advocating for the UAE to be able to buy U.S. military drones. And all sorts of other shady dealings that we've heard about CNS, but it couldn't include everything in the book. But yeah, so she leaves CNS, doesn't become Secretary of Defense. West Exec gets founded, and you're exactly right about the sort of it's beyond a dark money think tank. Because it's not, number one, it's not a think tank, but it's also not a lobbying firm either. It's the kicker about West Exec. They don't register at all for doing any sort of lobbying for work. They are just this amorphous, consulting firm. And if you ask folks about, I've talked to friends around DC, know folks that work there. one person, the business of it was like, that sounds no, they're not pushing for specific policy. It seems very shady. It seems like an organization that should probably be registered to lobby. At the very least, it has a direct pipeline into Democratic circles. And if there is a Democratic administration going forward, I won't doubt if at least part of it is filled with West exec people again, unfortunately.
Can I add one more point to what I've said before?
Sure.
Sorry. Also, about the personnel at the universities of this country, they tend to accept former former high positions of federal employees, such as Victoria Newland now teaches at the Columbia University. At the same time, she came back to NAD's member. So academia, think tank, also consulting firm, those areas, people just circling around and still trying to making their network even bigger than ever. And also they've been accepting children of foreign countries' top executives, like a current head of the defense ministry of Japan, Shinichiro Koizumi. He went to Columbia University. To be honest with you, his academic score was way low to be accepted by Columbia. But, they tend to accept those, airhead sons and daughters of a foreign big shots, then let them go back to their country, becomes a CIA arm of those countries. And that seems like those kind of people are all across the world working for the United States interest rather than their own nation's interest. And I
Thank
think
you,
that,
Rachel.
thank you.
There's people who have their hands raised.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Rachel.
you. Nick. Nick Meyer.
Thank you, Benjamin, for your presentation. 2 years ago, Kathy Kelly and I and Brad Wolf completed something called the Merchants of Death War Crimes Tribunal. If you put your email into the chat, I'll send you a link to that. It's basically a video presentation of U.S. wars, and there are a series of recommendations. Some of them are very similar to the ones you're making. Some of them go a little bit further. I think, reflecting on the work we did and where we are right now, I feel that we should have stressed much more how the U.S. military budget is a function of white racism. And it's very profound. I think we're seeing a comparison and an illustration of that, where we have thousands of people in the streets now in Minneapolis, many white people defending people of color. But we did not see anywhere near that number of people in the street trying to prevent the genocide in Gaza. This is a genocide conducted against what people here consider to be people of color. There is a complication about that Zionism enters into this, but the racial aspect of this is profound. And the fact that this population can be persuaded to spend billions of dollars on weapons that can destroy the entire planet in terms of the environment, and I think is a function of white racism. The U.S. was founded on slaughter of people of color, enslavement of people of color by Europeans. And in terms of the underlying ethos of that, I don't think that's changed appreciably. And we've got a problem here of spending $1 trillion on weapons. But it's not a question of whether the money is spent wisely or not, or whether the money is stolen or not. It's really a question of how these weapons, even if they were, everybody, had only AR, 15s or whatever, we would still be using them to try to grab people's stuff. The, billionaire class has been with us since the founding of this country in one way or another. And we would be out invading somebody to try to get something that we wanted. And so I wish that when we had, finished up our report, we would have given much more emphasis to that. But I think the profound destructive nature of white racism is being more and more revealed to us every day. And when we released the report, we weren't where we are now. And so Gaza has been a huge wake-up call for me. I felt for a long time that if we can't stop the genocide in Gaza, we can't stop any of these other problems, because it goes to the root of our perception of the world and who do we care about. And so I thank you for doing this work, because I think the information you provided is very revealing to people about the nature of the system. But I would say we need to get more into the racist and the racism part of this to understand how we can spend $1 trillion on these weapons. And for military people, there are many people in the military who are people of color. And they've been persuaded that it's to their benefit to side in with this racist culture, just the way, Malcolm talked about the house Negroes and the field Negroes. And that very much pertains to what's happening right now. So anyway, I know that the work you've done has been very arduous. It's not easy to put all this together and make sense out of it for people, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I appreciate you too, Nick. And I did put my email in the chat there, so
Thank
please, yeah, send me any information you got on any of that. I'd love to check it out.
And Nick, I would just add to that. I mean, you talk about what's going on today in Gaza. We need to remember what happened in Vietnam and Southeast Asia.
Exactly.
That we were warring against
Yeah.
and trying to destroy. Right. And that was heavily prevalent in the way the military and the
Yeah.
army trained, was to go after people who, quote, look different.
Yeah.
In the way that right. I mean,
Yeah.
destroy people who are not white. And we need to talk about that. And I think, Ben, I say this all the time, is that what is happening today is a pattern of behavior by the United States government and the people that exudes and exemplifies its racist ideology. And it is going on. Is it worse today because the weapons of mass destruction are worse today? But the attitude is the same. And that is something, Nick, you're absolutely right, that we probably don't talk about enough. But that seems to be the wars that the United States gets involved with and the people that the United States government tries to destroy over and over and over again. So thank you. Anybody else have their hand raised? We talked last time on WBAI that part of our discussion was talking about how we all work together. I'm sorry. There is somebody else having your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Well, I know I did.
Yes,
I
you're up.
I want to thank you for allowing me to participate in your event. I'm not a veteran even actually, and I'm not from New York City. Ben mentioned that he spent some time in Daytona Beach. Where I'm sitting currently this evening is in Sanford, Florida, so he probably knows where that is, I would suspect.
I live in
Hi.
Flagler Beach.
Flagler Beach, yeah, of course I know where that is, certainly.
We're about an hour away for the
Yeah,
New York City folks.
that's right. Yeah. It's cold here right now too, but we don't need to get into the weather. We got plenty else to talk about. Uh, um, I'm organizing a study group currently about your book. I've started reading you and Bill Hartung's book, and I'm about 3 chapters into it, and I'm greatly appreciating it so far. So at some point you might hear from me. I might see if I can rope you into speaking to our group or something along those lines. But
Okay.
my question has to do, I think, with where you finished up your presentation, which was that it's going to take active people to do something about this whole situation. And I guess we can plug in Eisenhower here, where he talked about an aroused citizenry. So, really, that's my question: is what are your further thoughts on that? How do we arouse the citizenry? Because what I find is that most people make no connection between the $1 trillion we're spending on the war machine and the various costs that it has on their lives in terms of healthcare, affordable housing. I mean, the whole litany of, the whole laundry list of ills and grievances that we currently have in this society. So, I'd kind of like to pick your brain on that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a it, we're in a weird and bad spot right now as a country for many reasons. But I think there could potentially be some lemonade to be made from the situation, particularly the current economic situation, because you're talking about a time where the president comes out and says, well, we want to raise the military budget by $500 billion. And people hearing that are struggling to pay their rent, they're struggling to pay their they're willing to let quadruple or even more just a month ago. And they're struggling with childcare, inflation, all of these things. I have two little kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. Childcare is absurd right now, and the government does very little to help you. And so when you talk about the American dream, of everybody, have some kids, go buy a home, 2 cars in the garage, chicken in the pot. For most people, that dream is just it's just that. It's just a dream. It's not real. You talk to millennials, you talk to young people, they can't afford a home, let alone the idea of having a kid. They can't afford any of that stuff. Even, I was talking to some Quincy Institute colleagues last week when I was in town, and some of them are explicitly not having kids because they can't afford it. So you're in a situation like that, and then you hear the president say, "Well, we still got another $500 billion for war." At some point, the American public is going to wake up to that. And, where all of the hope, and maybe it's naive, call me a dream or whatever, but I hope that people wake up and they get pissed off about that, I can't afford to put food on the table for my kids. You guys are a veterans group. I know you're not, Jay, but, 1 in 4 military veterans are facing food insecurity right now. And the VA is getting slashed by this administration too. And yet, once again, we're going to ratchet up $500 billion more for the military. I am hopeful that that contrast is going to stick in people's heads. At the very least, Hartung and I are going around the country and we're yelling it from whatever the nearest mountain is. We're trying to let people know about that. We're trying to get people, pissed off. And I hope the citizens gets more than aroused. I hope they get pissed off. Frankly, I hope they get pissed off in the way Todd is pissed off at the Quincy Institute. If we could channel that fury, into a push against militarism, I think that's our goal.
Thank you, Ben. And where we have younger veterans who are going to Minneapolis and are working together with the community groups, and going to different places in the country. We'll be going to New Orleans, that we do have, and we'll show later in the meeting that we do have billboards that are going up near military bases all over the country that talk about don't obey illegal orders. I know when we spoke last time, it was talking about how we can get out into the streets and be seen as veterans, and talking about these actions that the government is taking. And Nick, I know we didn't have enough action about Gaza, but in fact, Veterans for Peace joined the Indivisible and 5051 to specifically get out in the streets and talk about Gaza and actions in the streets, and probably more and more actions as what this military and this government is doing against the world. I mean, this government is on war against the world, as well as home and externally. So I will get off the soapbox, but just to say to everybody here that we are active, that we want to have everybody's input. And I know, again, when Ben and I spoke last time, that's what we're talking about, is to say what the writing is so important. And certainly Merchants of Death is so important. And just to say to everybody, Nick, that in fact, the videos are available from the enormous amount of research that you all did and from the hearings that you had. So Veterans for Peace is involved in many, many different types of actions and activities. We deal with climate and militarism to show the ongoing destruction. We need more people. And
We do.
Can I say one
You
more
do,
word
you
quick,
do, we do.
Susan?
The whole movement does.
Sure, quickly. Go ahead,
Yeah, so I'm not carrying some vendetta against the Quincy Institute. I'm a lawyer. I'm sure nobody reads this stuff, but I put some more left in spying upon the Minnesotans and all the people protesting ICE. Palantir and Peter J.D. Vance have been partners. Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance have been partners as part of the military data tech industrial complex for decades. When you talk about Vance just sort of falling into this and not really knowing, that's nonsense. He's part of it. He's essential to it, right next to Peter Thiel. So unless the peace movement begins recognizing the duplicitous messaging being done and cognitive warfare operations that are being conducted to confuse them, it's doomed to fail, which is what I believe it is, because nobody really wants to do any research to look deeper into it. So I would encourage some people to take a look at a couple of things. J.D. Vance was essential to genocide. He and his master were calling for, don't finish the job. I mean, that was incitement to genocide under international law. I'm a believer in international law. He was out there condemning protesters against the genocide. So nobody should be whitewashing him today. Take him what he is, and I'm not carrying any vendetta against anything. I'm too old for that. But let's at least get our information correct in this information war that's being conducted against us.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Todd. And I do read your emails, so thank you, Todd. Right, I do. We have worked together over many years, and thank you for your passion and for bringing up issues that I think are really important for all of us to hear. And Ben, thank you for coming tonight and talking with us. Did you want?
James has his hand up. James Gaffney.
We really appreciate. I'm sorry.
James.
I have my hand up.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, James. I didn't. Please Go
the
right
little
ahead.
golden
Thank you.
hand icon. But I wanted to say just two things quickly. I saw a video yesterday of a woman who was a teacher, native of Greenland, just an ordinary kind of person. And she was saying, we know here that we are people of color. And we also know the record that the United States has in dealing with indigenous peoples of color. And we're very aware of that issue. And there's no way we're going to let you get away with taking over Greenland. When we speak about racism, it's something that probably many people in the world are much more aware of than many American citizens. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Ben, and thank you very much for coming, is that I remember in organizing against the Vietnam War, the work that was being done by the American Friends Service Committee and the National Action Research on the military-industrial complex. They had a lot of material, including the wonderful air war slideshow, that they made specifically to get the message out. And they got that stuff to community groups. They were in touch and had speakers who would come, and the materials that they made were made for people in community groups to make a presentation. And there were booklets and pamphlets and audiovisual stuff. And I don't know if they're still functioning. I would guess so, given the times we're in. But you might be in touch with them. Thank you.
Yeah, they're still kicking. And they're still doing lobbying work too. I don't know as much about the grassroots side of the shop though, so can I can find out though. We actually we have a couple folks on staff that are AFSC alums though. So I can ask them in the chat. If you want to shoot me an email about that, I'd be happy to forward it and get you the info there.
Thank you.
From many years ago, it was excellent. They provided a script and I used to carry the carousel around with me. I'm sure it could be much easier done today, but it was terrific because you could show the slides and the script and teach people how to do that type of organizing. I used it all over New York.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, if they don't still have that, we need to do that. I'm giving the Quincy Institute homework. But so yeah, please email me, James. And if AFSC doesn't have that, then we'll find a way to make that happen.
So thank you again, Ben. Ellen, can you see anybody else's hand raised?
Nope.
Okay. But thank you so much for joining us.
All right, Nick snuck in.
Nick snuck in.
Go ahead, Nick.
In your speaking engagements, I hope you'll encourage people to undertake and so we are continuing that. We also there were five of us arrested back in March of last year, and we were fortunate enough to win a necessity defense against to have the charges, basically dropped for our trespass at this plant. So I think it's important to stress to people the necessity to be relentless and consistent. And this is not going to be one in a day. And I think that we're not used to having things that require a lot of patience and persistence. So anyway, so if you can carry that forward to people as you speak with them about getting in the way of these contractors and however they can see fit to do that, I think it's very powerful, and we are directing our message always to the workers as well as to the bosses and the general public. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Make good trouble.
Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you again, Ben, for joining us.
Alice has her hand up.
Oh, thank you. You may
I
never
want
get out
to
of
make
it.
my pitch one more time for making sure that people know we don't have to spend this money. They're getting a free ride because everybody's scared that we got to worry about Russia and China. They don't know that Russia and China don't want us to spend this money. They don't want to spend money. They don't even have money to spend. I mean, I'm like in my late 80s. I found out a month ago that China lost 33 million people during World War II. I mean, we're making such an enemy out of it. And Russia, I found out that I was terrified of communists, 27 million people. I mean, America's like an innocent. We never even had a war here. I mean, we had 911, and we started wars with every country on the planet. So we don't have to spend this money. We can do it. We can use it for healthcare and housing and school and clean energy. We have people that want to negotiate with it. Thanks.
Thank you, Alice. And again,
I'm with you, Alice. Mhm.
thank you, Ben. Thank you so
Thank you,
much
Susan.
for joining us. This evening's program has been recorded and it will be available. And thank you, Ellen Davidson. And Ben, you're welcome to stay with us. You know what I would ask?